Welcome back to the Composite Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Sarah Moore, and today I am joined by a renowned clinical psychologist who is a bodybuilder herself and also provides mental health support specifically for bodybuilders. Dr. Effie, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No worries. I'm super excited for this chat, and I think we're going to touch on a lot of topics that will help a lot of our listeners. So let's get into it. Can you start by sharing a bit about your background in both psychology and bodybuilding?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a clinical psychologist for 20 years now, actually. This is my 20th year, and so a long time. It's the only career I've had, and it's what I pretty much always wanted to do ever since I was in high school. So it's something I started studying straight after high school, no breaks or anything. And what drove me to want to do it initially when I was younger in high school, it was just sort of some kind of feeling inside me that I just wanted to help people. That was just something that I felt I wanted to do. And I always liked, I was always just sort of someone who's like a bit of a helper. And so I thought I'd enjoy that as a career, and I gave it a go and absolutely love it, which is why it's the only thing I've done. And clinical psychology means that I've worked with a lot of mental health issues, a lot of more severe end of mental health issues, psychiatric issues, and so that's where I focused a lot of my work. And later on I got into bodybuilding much later in life. This is only something that's maybe been in my life maybe about 5 years, but properly with a coach 4 years. And the way I got into that was actually not from any fitness background or sporty background before. In fact, I didn't have any of that before. I just dabbled in different sports as a kid and dabbled in different fad diets and bursts of, different exercises and classes and cardio and things like that. But the way that I got into bodybuilding was actually after my marriage ended 6 years ago now, and it was quite an emotionally abusive marriage. And when I left that, I was quite weak physically and emotionally. I lost a lot of weight from the stress, and so I was really quite fragile. And it took me about a year to really feel better and stronger mentally, just by starting to do things for myself and seeing friends more and just kind of rediscovering who I am again. And once I felt stronger mentally, it was like something inside me one day just felt like, now I want to be stronger physically. I sort of want to match how I was feeling mentally with my physical body. And so I joined a gym. I've got also 3 children, so I've got like a babysitter just so I can go to the gym and go for walks and things like that. And as soon as I entered the gym, I just felt amazing, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I just dabbled in different machines. And then COVID hit, and I couldn't do that anymore. And, I just sort of did what I could at home. And during that time, in COVID, I dabbled in some online dating. And I met a wonderful man who's now my partner, and he was into training and bodybuilding, and actually kind of told me as he saw me just, exercising at home in lockdown, you look like you build on muscle quickly. Have you ever thought about competing? And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to stand in a bikini on a stage and, go completely out of my comfort zone. That was like so not me. But he planted a seed in my head, and that seed began to grow. And over time, I actually started thinking, you know what? I'm feeling so much better within myself. And one of the things that helped me is with little things going out of my comfort zone. I reckon if I do this could really help me. And I'll do that. I want to challenge myself and get better and stronger in all the ways. So I looked up coaches. I wasn't even like on social media or anything like that. Looked up coaches, found one that I wanted to meet with, face to face. And the day that gyms reopened after COVID, I met with her, and I've been with her ever since, and have since competed a number of times, initially with the INBA and most recently this year with IFBB, and absolutely loved it. And I loved that I was going out of my comfort zone, even though it was a nervous mess, initially. But what I learned as I was actually training, doing strength training and working on building my physique and learning to eat better to fuel my body after I was so weak, was that, here I was thinking, okay, I'm already stronger mentally, I just need to be stronger physically now. What I learned was that actually as you're training to become physically stronger, you have to use your mind. And so you actually end up getting mentally stronger because it challenges you to go past your comfort zone and face pain. And then, with the dieting as well, there's a lot of discomfort there. And, navigating different challenges. And so I sort of figured out my own way to get through that, and then gradually started using some of the skills that I teach my clients in a more clinical setting to use, like managing stress and dealing with uncomfortable situations. And I thought, my God, I've got to teach other people how to do this in bodybuilding as well. And then as I met more people, in the bodybuilding community and learnt about how other people go in their journeys, I noticed that so many people struggle with their mental health and don't necessarily seek help for it, or they attempt to seek help but find that the help that they're getting, the person that they're, the therapist, psychologist they're seeing doesn't really understand bodybuilding and sort of sees it as maybe actually getting in the way of their life rather than helping their life, or thinking that, if they have mental health issues first, you've got to stop that and then, do it. And so I thought, gosh, there's a real gap here, and, I've found it to be of so much value to my own life. I would love to teach and help other people to be able to navigate whatever they're struggling with mentally and emotionally to really thrive in this sport, because it can actually add so much to your life. So that's how I gradually narrowed what I'm working on, and now channeling a lot of my focus into this.
Yeah, amazing. What an incredible journey. And I love how you talk about, the struggles of bodybuilding or the challenges of bodybuilding actually improving your life and, improving your resilience and things like that. And I think the initial step to compete is quite a big one for people. Like, a lot of people have self-doubt while they're competing, but also making that decision to compete. I know I personally did, and you mentioned a little bit of that in your journey as well. So can you offer some strategies that can help to overcome self-doubt, specifically for someone who wants to compete or is competing?
Yeah. So I think the first thing, just, with self-doubt is just to understand that it is normal to experience, self-doubt, and that, you don't have to kind of feel like you have to be totally confident and okay with everything, in order to do it. Because when you're challenging yourself and you're working on something that's important to you, because it's so important to you and you're hyper fixated on it, you're going to notice things that maybe other people wouldn't notice in that journey, and you want to do well, so you're constantly kind of doubting, are you good enough, are you going to be confident enough? So I think the first thing is just to really be realistic. This is not about dealing with self-doubt by thinking super positively. I know some people talk about positive affirmations and things like that. I don't really look at that. I sort of see positive affirmations, sometimes it can be a bit too positive. We need to be realistic. So if the self-doubt is about, have I done enough? Have I made enough progress? To look at the reality, okay, well, I've worked hard. I'm constantly making progress. I'll just keep doing that and see where it takes me. It's, part of it is, a lot of people talk about trusting the process. That's, that is part of it. That's also part of being realistic, knowing that there is a process and that's something that you need to work through. But really the first step is just asking yourself, what is it that I'm actually thinking and saying to myself, because that's going to impact how you feel. And what is another way to look at it that's actually more based on reality rather than just a speculation or an assumption. The other way to deal with it is not necessarily to challenge it like that, to think realistically, but actually just to acknowledge that you're having a thought and then just go back and focus on what's happening in the moment. So if, as you're training, you're catching yourself in the mirror and you're, oh my God, I'm not lean enough, or I'm not going to be good enough, to just acknowledge that, okay, I'm having a thought that I'm not lean enough. Let me just go back to what I was doing. I'm training right now. Let's bring the focus to that. So bring the focus back to the present moment so that it doesn't actually really get in the way. So they're kind of the two ways, depending on where you're at and what you're doing, either acknowledging it, noticing it, going back to the present, or just basing it on reality and on facts.
Yeah, that's great advice. And do you have any strategies, I guess, to become more aware of the thoughts that you're having and how you're talking to yourself? Because I know definitely from personal experience, sometimes you can be having those thoughts or saying those things to yourself and you don't even recognize it. So are there any ways that you can become more aware of those thoughts and self-talk?
Yeah, really good question. So, the biggest sign that this is actually happening is by how you're feeling. So your emotions are there to guide you. They're there to tell you if you're on track or not. If you're starting to feel a bit on edge and stressed and tense, that's telling you that probably what you're thinking is not helpful to you. So, in those moments where you're feeling a bit tense, stop what you're doing and just actually ask yourself, what am I thinking about? What's going through my mind right now that's getting me so worked up? And if you can, if where you are allows it, write it down. Get it out of your mind. I always say better out than in. So get it out. Look at it as it's in front of you visually, and look at whether, like I said before, is it realistic, or is this just an assumption? Is it speculation? Where did it even come from? But yeah, really to notice that it's happening is by noticing how you're feeling first.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And I know confidence is another thing that a lot of competitors, including myself, struggle with. So, what are the first steps that you recommend for committing to a bodybuilding competition or building up the confidence to actually commit to a competition?
So the question was how to commit to a bodybuilding comp and build confidence?
Yeah, so for someone who's struggling with confidence, what are the first steps that they can take to actually build the confidence to commit to a bodybuilding competition?
Okay, yeah. So I think the first thing again with confidence is just to know that no one was born confident. Okay, confidence is not just something that you just have. That if you look at people and you think that they're confident, that they just have this innate confidence. Confidence is something that you build, that you gradually build, and generally speaking, not just even with bodybuilding, but anything in life, confidence comes from repetition and consistency. Anything that you do for the very first time, you're not going to be confident doing, right? So it comes from from repetition. So if it's something like stepping on stage, then practicing your posing, visualizing that you're doing it as much as you can to kind of almost reenact what would happen on that stage to help you feel like you know what you're doing, right? And obviously you are in prep, which means that you are preparing for this. So all that preparation, will help you. So again, it's about trusting the process, that as you get closer to stage time, you're following what your coach is telling you and so on. All of those things are likely to help you. But the more exposure you can have to, especially posing and posing workshops and being around like-minded people, can actually help you to, to build that, that confidence. The other thing in terms of committing to it is to know why you're doing this. So, you need to really have it really clear in your mind why you're actually competing. And the more that the reason for why you want to compete is based on something internal, the more sustainable it's going to be. So if it's more external, if it's about having kind of some kind of validation from other people or recognition or just wanting to look a certain way, it's not likely to be sustainable because prep is hard. So this is not enough to really help you commit to it. So it's really about looking at some internal motivators for why you want to compete. So things like, if you are someone for whom it's important to be disciplined, that you want to improve yourself, you want to challenge yourself, those are sort of internal motivators. So having like a really clear why and then taking all the steps and repeating them over and over are the things that will help your confidence.
Yes, absolutely. And do you have any framework or advice that could help someone to develop or identify their why for competing?
Yeah, so to identify your why, it's really about looking at your values, like what really matters to you as a person. And we all have different things that matter to us, so this is not going to be the same for every bodybuilding competitor. But if you think about it, like in your life, there's different things that make up your life, different important domains. It might be family, it might be health, it might be your career. And in each one of those, maybe you want to be a different kind of person. So maybe, in your career, for example, you might want to be driven and hardworking. In your relationships, you might want to be someone that's really caring and loving and helpful. And then, you might have your health or your kind of this bodybuilding domain, and that might be about self-growth and, again, also being hardworking and being disciplined and being consistent, challenging yourself, those sort of things. So it's really thinking, what really matters to me? And how is this going to actually improve my life? What is it going to add to my life that maybe would help me in other areas of my life? So those are the kind of questions to ask yourself. But yeah, starting there and asking yourself what really matters to me, how is this going to add or improve my life, are the first steps, just to give you those clues for your why.
Yes, and it helps so much when you have that clearly defined why. Like I like to write mine down personally and come back
Yeah,
to it if you're having a hard day on prep, and
all
really
that way.
having just like going back to that why just helps so much. And every top competitor that I've had on this podcast has said like finding that why is so important. So
Yeah.
anyone looking to compete, definitely do that work early and figure out why you actually want to do it. And like you said, look for those intrinsic reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So bodybuilding is obviously very time consuming. You definitely know that. And it can be a challenge for anyone who's working or studying or just dealing with general life while also going through a prep or an off season even as well. Can you give any tips on juggling both and managing stress?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is there's a lot to juggle there, no matter what's going on in your life. And if you're someone that, for example, that's a parent like me, you've got that to juggle as well. So the important thing is to be organised and to look at how to prioritise your time. And I think the thing to remember too is that at different phases of your prep journey, different things are going to be important. And I guess if you kind of think of your life as like a pie chart that's made up of like different bits that are important to you, like maybe your relationships and work or study and the bodybuilding. The deeper you get into prep, the bigger that the bodybuilding is gonna it's going to take a bigger chunk of that pie. So more time will be allocated to that. So it's I personally like to put a lot of things in my calendar. I like to write things down and really plan my routine. If you're working shift work or if your day generally doesn't look the same because of your life circumstances, then at the end of each day, plan your day for the next day. It doesn't have to be like a week ahead or some rigid routine that you absolutely have to follow, because I think that's when things can sort of go haywire, when you're being a bit too rigid. But at the end of each day, okay, what have I got on tomorrow? How can I fit this in? So, I mean, for me, I like to train early in the morning if I can. So, I do that, but I also see a trainer. So on those days, it's a different time. But you've got to really move things around and see where you can fit them in. But yeah, prioritising and organising your time, writing it all down, is the best way. And I guess just recognising that at later stages in prep, some things will have to take a back seat, and that's okay. It's not forever. As long as you communicate that to people in your life so they understand and they know what that looks like, that's really important.
Yeah, definitely time management is so important. I definitely schedule everything as well. And like you mentioned, having kids and a family adds a whole nother element to it. So shout out to all the mums out there who are prepping. I think you're absolutely incredible. Do you have any advice on how competitors can support their partners or friends, family, children whilst they're going through a competition prep?
Yeah, look, the first important thing is communication. Please don't wait till you're like 6 weeks out to tell them what the rest of your prep is going to look like. It's really important to tell them from the beginning, this is what you're doing. This is why you're doing it, right? Because you would have figured out your why by then, why it's important to you, so they can understand you better, and what it looks like, what it involves. And, even if it means sort of explaining from if you're a first time competitor, you might not know exactly what it looks like, but you might say, look, right now for the next, few weeks, this is what I need to do. And then when you know the next phase, this is what that looks like. So first of all, just communicating that. Also communicating this is a phase. This is not like a forever thing. This is like right now when you're in prep and until you're competing, this is what you're doing, and it's important for you to reach that goal. And after that, you can spend more time with them and, catch up on the times that you've missed. So, that's really the thing. It's really about communicating and keeping that, the communication channels open. There's nothing wrong with, being tired or being irritable, but as long as you communicate why that's happening.
Yeah, I love that. I think communication is so important. And like you said, when you're tired or irritable, just actually sharing that. Like, I don't have a family, but I'll share that with my partner and just say, look, I'm feeling extra tired. Like, today's an extra hard day. And it's not, I guess, putting it on them, but then they're just a little bit more aware of it. So if your responses are different and things like that, I think it definitely helps if they're just a little bit aware that you're having a harder day.
Yeah. Sometimes, like, I also find, almost like giving it like your energy levels like a score, like saying, if you say to like your partner, look, I'm just like a 4 out of 10 today in energy levels, like I can't have a conversation, or I prefer just like cuddles but no talking. I just don't have the energy. So you find whatever way you can to just be open about it, and even a bit lighthearted about it, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to post show, because that can be so challenging for competitors, often more challenging than prep. What are
Yeah.
some common emotional responses that you see in athletes post-comp?
Yeah. So you're right, it is often more difficult than prep, and most people that come and see me for help come at that phase. One of the common ones is, what we call the post-comp blues, and it's really when you go from this high of being on stage and the glamour of all of that to, the curtains come down and then it's over. And so a lot of people feel quite lost and feel like, who am I now? When you focus so much on being this bodybuilder, this competitor, and so there's these identity shifts, of kind of not knowing how to adjust their identity now. Also, of course, your body changes, so a lot of body image issues, come up after being used to fixating so much on becoming, lean or comp ready, stage ready. So that's another common one. And then, relationship with food, is another common one as you're adjusting to eating differently and your hormones are all over the place. So everything sort of, fluctuates. So it certainly is an adjustment period, but they're the common ones that I see.
Yeah. And what do you suggest to find balance and maintain mental health and potentially overcome some of these issues post-show?
Yeah. So remember when I was talking before about that pie chart, that's made up, that makes up your life, and how closer to stage time, more of that chunk is focused on the bodybuilding comp. Well, now we need to get that balance back a bit more in that, in that pie chart. So even though before it was more shaded with bodybuilding, to get back to those other areas of your life that really matter to you, those relationships that we talked about, that's the first place to start to really fix your environment. Go back on date nights if you have a partner, or spend time with your kids, family, friends. Get back to that. It'll make you feel more alive, more human again, and also make you feel like there's a lot more to your life than just bodybuilding, because there is. It's one part of your life, and you're doing bodybuilding. You're not just a bodybuilder. So it's about embracing all those areas of your life. The other thing is, of course, hopefully you're continuing to work with your coach and they're guiding you through either reverse diet or recovery, whatever you've chosen to do with them. So making sure that you follow that to the best of your ability, and if you're struggling, to please communicate that with them, because I think a lot of times people are a bit ashamed, feel guilty if they went off that plan. All of these are totally normal. So, you can always get back on track. I think it's when we hide things and then, your coach doesn't know that's when things, are more difficult to move forward. And so then the other thing is, set yourself some new intentions for this post-comp phase. Some of it might be to do with bodybuilding. Maybe you want to, improve your physique or grow, as most people need to in their off-season. You keep growing. And then, what other intentions do you have? Are there certain career or study goals that you've had that you had to put on the back seat that you can get back to? Are there certain, friendships you really want to invest in that you haven't had a chance to do? So, again, writing that down, setting those new intentions and writing them down, this is what you're working on now, are all important to just get that balance back.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I think having those new intentions and also just enjoying things that you couldn't necessarily do or didn't have time for on prep is essential to staying happy post-show and just feeling like you're staying on track, I guess. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And moving on to comparison, because that's a massive thing, whether it's post-show,
Mm.
comparing yourself to, she's put on 6 kilos or only 1 kilo post-show, and I've put on 3 or 4. So I think that's a massive thing, comparing yourself to other competitors post-show, but also during a comp prep phase. I know during my first prep, I was looking at all of the other girls on Instagram, trying to figure out who was in my height category and oh, she's got better glutes than me and things like that. So what advice can you give to athletes who find themselves constantly comparing themselves or their progress to others?
Yeah, this is totally common, and especially because we're all on social media, so we see, who's competing with us, and part of knowing who's competing with us is awesome, because you can build a community and meet like-minded people, and you can really cheer each other on. So that part is really helpful. But I guess we all want to do well, and so we can't help but compare. In this sport, as we know, as cliche as it really is you versus you. You can't go any faster or make your body work any differently than what it would do. So you don't know how your body's going to respond. Something I read once in a book that I often say to ladies that I work with is, you can't compare your step 1 to someone's step 20, right? So you might have someone that's been working in this field or bodybuilding for years, and so of course they're going to have more muscle density than you, and bigger glutes than you, and things like that. That's just the nature of it. So you need to really, the only person you should compare yourself to is yourself. Look at your check-in photos at the start. Look at where you are now, and keep looking at that amazing progress that you've made. And if you're finding that you're really getting too much into comparing to other girls, stop looking at your social media. Do a detox. Like, you might need to stop it for like a week, to just not to look, or unfollow people for a little while, and whatever you need to do to just get that away and bring the focus back to yourself, because you're the only one that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, comparing you versus you is so important, but then also body dysmorphia can be a massive issue. So, what advice do you have for someone who's dealing with body dysmorphia, especially in a sport that's so focused on physical appearance?
Yeah. So first of all, body dysmorphia, it is a disorder, and it's when you're really hyperfixated on what you perceive to be flaws in your body. There might not actually be flaws. There might be just perceived flaws. There might be even non-existent. But to you, you can see them. And so, to deal with that, it's not so much just advice I'd give people, because it's actually not just about advice. There's actually like a therapy. We need a particular therapy treatment that we need to go through to help them navigate that. And one of the steps, I guess, just to give a glimpse, because there is kind of a lot involved, is what we call body neutrality. So it's looking at your body as in a neutral way, rather than judging it as being good, bad, flawed, or perfect, or anything like that. And what that means is to look at your body for what it does for you, rather than how it looks. So all the things that it can do for you, the way that it cares for you, the way that it can be strong, the way that it can perform. So really taking the focus away from just how you're looking to what your body actually does for you. And the other part is, particularly in this bodybuilding journey, is again to trust the process, trust your coach, be guided by them about whether you're on track or not, rather than what you're seeing. And particularly if you're in the post comp, your body is meant to change. So that's just that's a normal part of it. So it's really about normalizing what's going to happen at different phases, knowing how you can trust the process, and trust your coach that you're on track. But taking the focus away from the one body part that you think is flawed in some way, and that kind of perfectionistic tendency to there has to be this way, and just look at, again, progress. I'm making progress, and that's what actually really matters in this sport.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned obviously weight changes as well. Athletes sometimes struggle with seeing the scale number go up, particularly during a build phase. I know a lot of females struggle with this. So, how can they maintain a healthy perspective on their body weight and muscle gain during an intentional build phase?
Yeah. So again, I think firstly, normalizing it. So this is meant to happen, and if it's happening, that's a good thing, because you're not meant to stay stage lean. Your body would not work properly if you're a female, in particular. Your hormones would not work properly. So you need this to actually happen, and that's part of growing. This is unlike the general population that maybe want to stay at, like, let's say, healthy weight all year round. This is a sport where this is going to fluctuate. You build, and then you cut for a comp. So that's a normal and natural part of it. I would suggest to have some helpful rituals before you weigh yourself on the scales. So before you weigh yourself on the scales, focusing on things that you're grateful for in this journey, things that you're excited about, things that you're looking forward to, and noticing maybe one improvement or progress that you've made over the week. Then go and weigh yourself, and have also even something to look forward to straight after you weigh yourself, so that you're not hyper fixated on that. It's just like one number, and we can't let it define us. And if the number goes up, it's meant to go up anyway. So that's part of it. And again, hopefully you're guided by your coach, and they can let you know if you're on track or not, in this journey as well.
Yes, I love those tips so much. And I think it is super important to have a coach as well, post comp and for your build phase, because like you said, they can tell you if you're on track or not, and your weight
Yeah.
probably is meant to be going up too. So that's important to recognize, like you said.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
then moving back to post comp again as well, I know a massive issue for some competitors is binge eating post-competition after such a long period of restriction. So do you have any steps that athletes can follow to regain control and also just overcome guilt from binge eating?
Yeah. Yeah, it is quite common that this happens, and part of it is just like your hunger cues and your hormones are all over the place afterwards. So the first thing I'm just going to say is just to really be kind to yourself, because prep is hard enough, and you got to the stage, and that's a huge achievement just to get to that day. So, as you're kind of adjusting and your body's adjusting, it's just important just to kind of be compassionate towards yourself, that, if you ate more than you wanted or thought you were going to, that's okay. Your body's a bit confused at the moment as well. But I think really the important thing again is, hopefully if you've got a coach, that you've got a plan that you can follow. And that plan might be a flexible plan, but it's just important just to have a plan. I think sometimes when people go a little bit too much go with the flow, then that's where they can sort of, can go downhill. Just because, if you're following your hunger cues are off track anyway. So it's important to have a plan that you're following, even if that plan could include some meals out, with friends, with family, to catch up, to get that balance back. But as long as you've got that plan, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it, that can really help. And if you did, there's a difference between overeating and binging, but if you did overeat at a certain time and you feel like you had more than you wanted, then it's okay. I think when people beat themselves up over it, that's what makes it worse, because this really comes from this all or nothing mentality that, oh, well, I've already stuffed up, so I may as well eat more, or I may as well have this whole packet of biscuits or whatever. So it's about just recognizing that. And then the final tip is to notice whether the binge eating is about certain emotions, emotional eating, like what's actually going on for you in that time. Asking yourself, well, I'm actually reaching for that Tim Tam. Is it because I'm stressed? Is it because I'm sad? Is it because I'm lonely? Is it because I'm bored? There's a solution to each one of those, and it doesn't have to be food for comfort. So learning other ways to manage those emotions, and that that can be by seeing a psychologist. Learning other ways to manage difficult emotions is really, really helpful to navigate binge eating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think seeking help from someone like yourself is super important in a situation like that. But can you share a few examples of techniques that you might give people to help overcome some of those emotions like boredom or loneliness that is actually causing binge eating?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I get girls that I work with to do is to make themselves like a list of like, what are some things I can do, when I'm bored, right? So it might be, even just like, I'll write an email that I've been meaning to write, or I'll call that friend that I haven't called in ages. So you might have a little to-do list. Okay, well, if I'm bored, let me start tick some things off my to-do list. If you're sad, like can you go for a walk? Can you, again, call a friend? Can you listen to music that lifts you up? So it depends, obviously what we're dealing with. Is it a particular unresolved problem that you're just trying to avoid and you don't want to look at, and so food kind of numbs you in that moment? So what are some steps to solve that problem? But again, writing down, if you've got like a list, okay, these are things I can do when I'm bored. These are things I can do that kind of cheer me up if I'm sad. These are things I can do to distract myself, can help. Another little strategy that I've got is one that I call like the 4 Ds. So like 4 little things beginning with D. So the first one is to delay. So basically walk away from whatever you were about to eat, and just delay even just 10 seconds, okay? Because what often happens is when we have an urge to do something, we act on it straight away. So, if you actually give yourself the chance to just delay for a moment, you might find that urge that you felt actually passes, and it just gives you a chance to think before you act. The next one is to deep breathe. So while you're walking away, taking some deep breaths, that just helps you think more clearly, helps you calm down. The next one is distract. So distract yourself with something. Again, go write that email, call that friend, write that text message, scroll on Instagram if you need to, like just whatever, just to kind of distract yourself, remove that focus from the food. The final one is drink water. So just, it's still the act of putting something in your mouth, but just drink water. Maybe you were thirsty, not actually hungry. And after you've done all that, see how you feel. And if you still feel like you really want to have that, whatever it is that you're craving, go for it. But have one. Have one and walk away and see if that kind of satisfies it. You don't have to, again, be all or nothing about it.
Yeah, absolutely love those tips. I think that will be super helpful for anyone listening, and also, helpful during a comp prep as well, to use
Yes,
those 4Ds if you are feeling a bit of hunger. Um,
yes.
Especially, I think distraction is a big one that definitely helps me during a prep. So,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely love those tips. In your experience, what's the most common mental block that you see which prevents athletes from reaching their full potential in this sport?
Yeah. So self-doubt is one of them. So like we spoke about. And the other one is perfectionism. It's this all or nothing, mentality that like I have to look a certain way, and if I don't, then I'm not worthy enough, or I'm not good enough. Or it's again with eating as well, as we spoke about. Like if you've kind of had one. If I use Tim Tam again as an example, you had one Tim Tam, you think, oh well, I stuffed it up, I may as well have the whole packet. That kind of mindset can really get us in trouble. So when I notice that kind of thinking pattern, the perfectionism, the all or nothing, that really rigid thinking, that's when we need to really look at that. Like, where is that coming from? What are these rules that you're trying to live by, and how realistic they are, so that we can just again think more realistically, not positively, just being realistic. But yeah, they're the most common mental blocks that get in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think perfectionism is a big one, because I think the sport definitely attracts those type A kind of people who are definitely perfectionists, and I've certainly struggled with it in the past and still do sometimes.
Yeah,
So, what tips would you give to someone who is struggling with that all or nothing mentality and just really trying to be perfect?
yeah. So, like I said, the first thing is really to look at how realistic that actually is. With perfectionism, as I said, you can't compare where you're at to someone who's way further along. It's not even fair to do that. For you to compare yourself to someone who's, let's say, an Olympian, like, is that really even a fair comparison, right? So that's not fair to them either, for you to compare yourself to them. So, you can absolutely, look at other people and other competitors for inspiration, but not to really take away from your own journey. So bringing the focus back to being realistic. Have I actually made progress? Look at the photos. Look at like what you've achieved so far, not just physically but mentally as well. How much more resilient you've become, and how you've pushed through your workouts, and how you've stuck to your diet, and all of those things. So looking at actually the little bits of progress that you've made, and really celebrating all those small wins along the way. It's the thing with perfectionism too is you're just looking at like the end, the end goal, but there's so many little bits that make that up, and it's we can't ignore them, because that's where the value is. It's in the process, not the outcome. So that's really what I get them to do, and really get them to look at their strength, and all the benefits that they've gotten so far, and to bring the focus back to that. And again, to write it all down, to keep reading that to yourself. Those are kind of your affirmations. It's your own individual bits of progress.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that comes back as well to having a strong why. And then once you have your strong why and you actually start identifying the positives and the wins throughout the journey, it just makes the entire journey so much more enjoyable, because
Yes,
you would know yourself, like, show day is over so quickly and you might be
yes,
on prep for 16 to 20 weeks. So if you're not enjoying the actual journey and celebrating those little wins, then it's not really worth it just for that one day.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, for athletes who regularly compete, what are some long term strategies that you recommend for maintaining mental health in such a high pressure environment?
Yeah, so like the first the first step I say to manage stress in general is to do something they call like a life audit. Okay, so you look at like what makes up your life, and what really adds to your life and uplifts you and energizes you, and then really what sucks the energy and the life out of you, and do you really need to keep those things in your life? So to manage stress anyway better in life, we need to look at that. And I think the problem is with all of us, like we do so many things on autopilot, we don't even realize like we're doing it. And, I know in my own life, like I'm always running around, with kids and different things. And sometimes, I have to sit down and think, do I really need to do all this? Like, is all of this actually necessary? Or am I trying to be the perfect, parent, the perfect competitor, the perfect everything? And so I'm just doing too much. So to look at really what's necessary and what's not. Sometimes, it's certain people in our lives as well. Sometimes people drain our energy. We need to look at where we spend our time and our attention. So that's like a really important thing to just do on a regular basis. This is a life audit. If you're feeling really depleted, that's a good sign that maybe it's time to look at that. The other thing that I'm like a huge fan of that I teach, like I think every single one of my clients, no matter what they're going through, is like relaxation techniques and mindfulness. So knowing how to stop, to pause, to focus on your breath, to let go of all that tension that you're storing in your body. And I guide a lot of my clients through that and make them a recording to listen to so you can practice it regularly. It's kind of like my version of medication, for stress and anxiety. So yeah, taking that time out to pause and not feel like you've got to be on the go all the time. Little things we mentioned before, celebrating your progress, the small wins, really, really important to do that so that you can enjoy the journey and make it really make it fulfilling and enjoyable. Having a routine, as we said, like a routine that works for you, that can help you manage stress so that you feel like, okay, you're in control of your life. You're not letting things control you. You're taking control of it. And then, the final thing is connecting with loved ones, to people that are important to you. Having that support. If you're really, really struggling with like managing stress, you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious all the time, please seek help. This is like what I do, but there's other therapists out there that you can get help with managing stress if that's sort of the main issue. So yeah, they're the main things.
Yeah, I love those tips. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think a lot of these tips will be so beneficial to our listeners, and I think that what you're doing in the space regarding mental health for bodybuilders is absolutely incredible and absolutely necessary, and something that a lot more competitors should focus on, not only for overall mental health, but I think it could help people be more competitive as well if they do have their mental health in check. So where can people find you if they do want to reach out for your services or just retain some of your content?
Yeah. Thanks for saying all that, by the way, Sarah. I really love what I do, so I love that I can do that. So where people can find me is, first of all, on Instagram, I'm called the Bodybuilding Psychologist, and the way it's spelled is it's that _ bodybuilding _ psychologist. There's links there to my website where you can either do one-on-one therapy with me, or also just, as we spoke about, how to commit to a comp and knowing your why. I've got a masterclass that you can purchase where I actually guide you step by step on how to figure out your why and your values. So that can really help. And also some checklists in there about how to know if you're mentally ready to compete, and also, signs that maybe you're struggling post-comp, and to give you some clues if you need further help. So you can find all those links there on my Instagram.
Amazing. I will link all of that below as well so people can find it easily in the show notes. Thank you so much to our listeners as well for listening. As always, if you like this episode, please don't forget to rate it on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help us grow and get on more incredible guests like Dr. Effie, and also share it to your stories. Let us know what you learned or what you're doing while you're listening. Tag both of us because we love to see it. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Dr. Effie, for coming on. This was an incredible conversation.
Thanks for having me.